the environmental issues with AI. If we're going to say we're a sustainable practice as architects, how are we going to then balance out AI within our field? Some data centers that are using geothermal, using the heat produced from these buildings for the technology itself to heat the building. But, there's a lot of wastewater because it needs clean water. It can't be gray or black water. It has to be clean, fresh drinking water to cool these machines. It's called citizen architects, other ways of doing architecture. They have like a really powerful line in there talking about how architects are like citizen experts and then there's expert citizens. We go into these places, right, trying to design, trying to help these communities, trying to figure out what's going on, but we'll never know as much as the locals do. I think that's because our business of architecture is tied to our history of colonialism within these practices. So a way to subvert that, I think that's another thing too, the dismissing of this common knowledge or like the knowledge of people who have lived in these places for ages, dismissing that as vernacular, as kind of a style of architecture rather than like in its own inherent form. I think there's two types of silence. I think there's silence that is given, told onto people by people with privilege. I don't think that oppressed communities are necessarily silent because they've been rendered silent.
This is the Space Whispering Podcast with Rainy, where we explore and design containers that whisper, "You belong here exactly as you are." We are building a community of soulful whisperers and creators. Join us by subscribing, leaving a review, and following on Instagram at Rainy_. If you're ready to transform your space into something authentically you, and if this episode inspired you, imagine the worlds we can create together. Book a discovery session at rainy.co. Download the freebie. Whispers, keep creating spaces that feed your soul, and let's whisper together. Besitos. Today we have Drew, the student, University of Kansas, KU. And I met him last year, and he talks about how we met in his studio second year. And it's incredible, a lot of the students that were in that class, how they thought and how creative they were from a place of being themselves. I really enjoyed my time at KU, also for the opportunity that Jae Chang gave me, but the trust, and that I was free to give my opinion, talk to the students from a place of my personal experience and what I see. I was able to be also on the final critique with other architects, professionals. Some of them even traveled from other states. I felt blessed to be there and see the results. And one of the things when I was talking to each student, present your project without looking at the computer or the images. So talk to me as human to human and tell me about your project. And it's incredible the impact that created and also the confidence that it gave the students, at least from my point of view. And Drew mentioned it such a beautiful way. He said it, I embody architecture now. In the podcast, we talk about wellness and we talk about our health and also how our spaces affect our inner world. To be able to see someone in school that's going to graduate soon, has an opportunity to work and study in South Korea one semester, I think it's so impactful to see different cultures, to get out of the comfort zone. And that's what has helped me design the way I design today. It's traveling, it's meeting people from different cultures, it's talking to the local people wherever I go. I really have always had this passion to know the person and then design for them if I am invited. I say it that way because I also want to be very respectful of the things I say. Am I welcome to speak from my truth or my knowledge? But I also want to know your knowledge. I also want to know how you live or how you work. And then based on that, I'll design an office, a building, a house, an interior project for you. And it's been life-changing. It's been life-changing. But again, it always starts with you. Design, there's a bunch of designers. Even AI is creating today. The thing that we have to put first is the human aspect. And sometimes put aside your ego and put aside your knowledge. Let's learn together. Let's find solutions together. And then that's where the project starts. And I hope you listen to Drew, listen to his wealth of knowledge and his experiences in architecture. And if you're an architecture student, I hope this helps you. I'll be teaching at a university, Unive, next semester from May to June. I'll be teaching design 9 and 3. So almost graduating, and students coming in. And I did that because I want to give back, but also talking to Drew and the opportunity that Jae gave me, I have a lot more to give and I have a lot more to learn. Hi, Drew.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so thankful that you're here with me again, second
Yes.
try. And we've been testing mic and internet, but hopefully this time.
Lots of troubleshooting, but I'm hoping that it'll work out this time.
Yes. I'm so curious about what you're wearing. It
Oh,
seems
my
special.
overalls?
Yeah,
Yes, my overalls. I found this company, Lucy and Yak. They do a lot of sustainable sourcing of cotton, and they make all of these fun dungarees. I think they're based in the UK. But yeah, I have a whole collection of them now. I've been collecting probably starting last semester. I started collecting them. So yeah.
Nice. I love that. Isn't it? I love to like buy source from small businesses or people that have like an intention with everything
Mhm.
they do, because I think at the end of the day, that's what it is. Really, like the intention behind what you do and why, like the
Yeah,
end
and
goal.
in this company, it's so nice because each pair of overalls you get, it'll have like a QR code that you can scan, and it'll tell you where you like where they source the cotton from, like all the labor that's gone into it. So it really makes that labor visible, and that's what I really appreciate too. So it's nice to just be able to say, okay, I know where my stuff is coming from. I know who's making it. I know it's ethically sourced. Um, and it's a little pricier than, just something you might buy at a retail store, but I think that price is being able to show your support for those things. And you know I don't know, I think it's nice, and just to know that everything is coming from a good place.
Yeah, and about the price, I think this is where we have forgotten a little bit because we have so much access to less expensive stuff and a lot of it.
Hmm.
And we have forgotten what it is to actually make clothing, the labor behind it, the intensity, the where it's sourced. And so once we realize that, I bet you buy less clothes now.
Hmm. Yes.
You have less, but you use it more and it
Hmm.
lasts longer. At least that's my experience.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. And I think I haven't made garments in such a long time, but I'm an avid quilter. And so I quilt a lot. And before, like I've always been surrounded by it. So I guess I didn't necessarily feel the true value until I made one myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much labor in here that my mom and grandma, aunt, and great aunt, all of them put into this. There's so much time, so much money, so much care. And I think that's the same for clothing, and those goods, they tend to last longer than something that's mass produced and manufactured. So,
So, Drew, talk to us about you.
yeah, of course. Yeah, I guess I should introduce myself first. So
Yes,
yeah.
I also want to add like something about your name, like growing up with your name, how you felt. Does it have a
Hmm.
meaning for you?
Yeah.
And does it come from somewhere? It's like your identity. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Drew Graff. I'm a third year student here at the University of Kansas studying architecture. And actually, right now I'm at our warehouse over here for design build, which is something really fun that KU does. But my name, Drew, it actually comes from my dad's or not my dad's middle name, but my middle name comes from my dad. So I guess it's not really my name, but my full name is Drew Christopher Graff. And that's been something that's been done through my generations, through the generations for our family. So my dad has my grandfather's first name as his middle name. So I feel like that's something that's always that I carry around with me. And Drew actually came from one of my dad's close friends in high school. My dad was very much he calls himself like a car junkie. He loves cars. And one of his close friends, and him always would used to, tinker on cars, and his name was Drew. And he's like, it's kind of an homage to him, I kind of like that good deep friendship. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but um, yeah, having that name and then even now post him passing, it's kind of nice because my dad is always like, I remember back in high school and all these things, and even now he still drag races cars and is a part of car culture. So I think it's nice that my name plays a part in like my dad's story too, and I take pride in that.
Nice. Isn't it interesting when you know like the origin of your name? Like it just gives it more value in
I
a
know, it's
sense.
so funny because I'll talk to my dad. I'll be like when I first was like, why'd you pick the name Drew, not Andrew? Because a lot of times people think it's just shortened for Andrew, which it's not. And so some people call me Andrew. It's like, it's fine, but I prefer Drew because that's the name I was given and I take pride in that. But yeah, I think it's so funny that our names are so connected to stories and so connected to history.
And talking about stories, how did we meet first? And then secondly, why architecture? Why
Why
architecture?
architecture? Oh, that's the big
Yeah.
question, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
I'll first start with how we met.
Okay.
It was in second year studio. It was a year ago. It was a year ago today, roughly. In Jae Chang's second year studio. You came in and filled in for him. And the project briefing kind of plays a role in this. We were making a food hall for the future. So thinking about how technology could be used to, enhance the workers' lives, enhance the people going to that location's lives, and their experience of the place. And you were called in from Jay, I think, yeah, to come in and kind of help us because he was absent. So you were kind of doing desk crits with each of us. And I vividly remember after you left, I think we bumped into each other in the hallway as like I was passing by or something. And we had this conversation about technology that has stuck with me. And yeah, last time we were recording, I was talking about how it really started me to like think about architecture in a very like embodied way because I mean obviously architecture is really embodied. It's building space, it's building um locations for our bodies to exist, move, see, hear, taste. And when we were talking about technology, I was kind of getting into like a rut because I was like, that doesn't feel embodied. How is that supposed to work with architecture in a way that doesn't just replace the human? Um, so you started that conversation with me, and that has stuck with me. And even going forward into through the rest of that studio, thinking about how technology could be used and thinking about AI. So yeah, that's how we met. And then the other question, why architecture? I mean, I think it embodies so much. I've always been a fan of math, and I'm sure this is how a lot of architects are: fan of math, fan of art. Try and merge them together. There's architecture. So that's kind of how I landed, but as I started going through schooling, I started to find locations to really involve myself and start to think about architecture outside of that STEM field. It really is a humanities field to me now. It's deeply tied to, gender identity. It's deeply tied to race. It's deeply tied to ability level, the social aspect of it. I mean, even now, architecture has always been tied to capital. So it's obviously economic. People think of it as a business now. So thinking about the ways architecture is run and how it is kind of manifesting is now kind of where my interest lies rather than the pure practice of it.
I love that. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I muted myself, but I guess I unmuted. I, how now do you use architecture in tech? Like after our conversation,
Mhm.
like what was it that impacted you? And then how did you practice it after a whole year?
Yeah, so I think the part that I was getting confused when we were thinking about tech is I jumped straight into the deep end and I was like, okay, let's do everything artificial intelligent. Let's find ways that we can remove some of the labor for people working in the kitchen. And I think it was especially hard because I had fused a culinary school into this food hall. So it wasn't a pure business. It was also a place for students to learn and to engage with food. And I wanted these like different vendors to be ran by the students. So to me, it was like, okay, if I'm putting like artificial intelligence or technology that's replacing the labor and kind of, I don't want to say like the human aspect of the cooking process, how is that going to relate then to the students trying to learn how to cook? So what I came into was I was like, okay, I need to find key moments of labor that could be easier to do. So I was looking at, dishwashing. Dishwashing is important, but it's not necessarily something that everyone is like, it feels like you could replace that time with more cooking for the students and it'd be more valuable. So there I felt comfortable allowing technology to take over, thinking about ways in which you could just like have self-sorting for dishes or have technology that could, reorganize kitchenware, reorganize the space and keep it clean. Obviously, cleanliness is a big part of cooking, but trying to think of other ways tech could enhance that aspect, but not take away or replace the humans trying to learn how to cook and like how much spice to add or how much, veggies to throw in with like the meat that we're making. So that was how I learned through that. And I think moving forward, I'm starting to realize that like even things like AI could be helpful for, I know there was research being done for generating hospital floor plans, There's so many studies and data sets that have been done to show like how far a bed should be from a window for a patient to feel this way. So how can we take that and apply that to our buildings and floor plans so that we can then spend more time designing small factors that it can't touch, like facade treatments or experiential wayfinding or things of that nature.
Yes, 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 beautiful. I love how you took it, and I knew it because once I saw, you know, one of the things that you mentioned last time, and it was true, that I wanted to see who you were before I saw the project. I and that was the way
Yeah.
I started, like without showing me images. How do you sell the project to me? How do you? Because I wanted to, because sometimes we hide behind the images, we
Hmm.
hide behind, yeah, like the design as well, and then you become second plate. And in practice, what I realized that it's the opposite. That actually you sell who you are, and then you sell your project. And it's not like you are like, it's not, it sounded like selling yourself. It's not selling yourself. It's allowing people to know who the person that designed the project is, or who the person that is responsible, because they're going to depend on you and they're going to trust you to manage their investment
Hmm.
or their home, because it's still an
Yeah.
investment, right? And so we forget the human, the one on one. And, in architecture, we usually wear black, or we usually wear gray or white, and we stay there so we can go behind the scenes. And that's okay. That is beautiful. But we forget that, yes, the authenticity of design is important, or the form, or how it functions, but we need our voice, and we need our character to also be heard.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something I've started to really see is um like especially architects that stick with me, they're more advocates first than designers. And even now we're getting the KU is getting an architecture revamp. Our space is getting designed by Big Bjark Ingels group. And a lot of us are honestly quite upset with it because it's a really interesting visual project, but it doesn't necessarily speak to what KU is trying to do. Their whole goal was to make a space of innovation, pushing our tech with mass timber and all that, which is great. That's great. It's super sustainable. But for KU, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the context here, and it's honestly just a giant box. So to call that innovative is quite frustrating for us, because we're all of us as students and faculty are saying we don't necessarily like this, and they're pushing for it to continue that way. So it's really hard whenever you can't connect with an architect, and he's such a big architect that it's hard for us to connect with him because we're just students. But yeah, and I think definitely that you can start to see projects that really flourish whenever an architect is an advocate for its client.
Advocate, an architect advocate for its client. That's so beautiful, Drew. And you're just like, you're in third year, and this is what when I met you, and I was thinking like, oh my God, this, like you have so much, and I wanted you to see the opposite side, because I understand when you want to fight for humanity and you want to fight for, you know, society and how we live and the quality. But I also learned that technology is something that it's giving us more
Hmm.
time to do this, what we're doing, having conversations that, you know, we don't have control how it spreads, but that whoever listens to it has an like a light bulb turns on and sees something different, like at least knows that there's a different way to do things.
Yeah, and I definitely think that technology is allowing us, like you said, to have these conversations. But I also do think it's important to realize that sometimes this is like, I don't want to get into hating on AI, but
No.
there's a lot to critique about it, especially if we're going to welcome it with such open arms. I think we also need to be really critical of it. We were talking last time, and I think it's important to bring back up again, the environmental issues with AI. If we're going to say we're a sustainable practice as architects, how are we going to then balance out AI within our field? Thinking about, I know there's some places, some data centers that are using geothermal, using the heat produced from these buildings, from the like generators and all of the storage systems and data facilities for the technology itself to heat the building. But there's a lot of wastewater because it needs clean water. It can't be gray or black water. It has to be clean, fresh drinking water to cool these machines. So thinking about those kind of things is really important, and also the ethics of AI and technology. Since we are such a socially relevant field, in the sense that we are dealing with the humans so much, we need to also realize how AI has impacted humans. A lot of data sets are made by white men. So how does that impact the way in which AI recognizes people? Amazon, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, they tried to use AI to filter resumes. And it rejected all women because it looked at data sets, right? And it said, okay, all higher up CEOs and high performing people are men. So that means women cannot perform the job well. And that's what AI does. And a lot of these are black box models, so we can't get into the data and be like, okay, where did this data go wrong? Where did it start to make these decisions? So all of these things start to compile. So we just got to be
When
cognizant.
when have you done all this research? Like what's your process?
The process, well, honestly, I've
Yeah.
always been like, even through high school, I was very, very engaged in critical theory. So thinking of like Black scholarly work, Angela Davis, bell hooks, that kind of stuff. And it's kind of progressed into a wider span of things. Like even now, I picked up a book called Scale from Geoffrey West, which is about biology and how that can relate to the built environment in cities, and how things are all kind of related in a theoretical sense as they come to die. So how all of these things can be related back to a life. So a city has a life. How can we cultivate that? But as for AI, I've obviously it's a huge conversation right now, and a lot of our classes are talking about it and utilizing it. And I have friends. Well, I'm roommate actually is a big advocate against AI. Talking about it all the time. It's like this is this, and we talk about it, playing devil's advocate to each other. That's kind of how we communicate, and that's what we like to talk about, is these kind of theoretical things, stuff based in research. It's really nice for us to kind of discuss those. But I will say Wendy Chun, she's a philosopher. She does a lot of work with like digital media more so than architecture. But I think a lot of her work, especially on like software and memory, plays a big part of how I view AI.
And have you heard of this term that I forgot the name, sorry, but it's like AI or technology and like sustainability, like living together.
I have
So
not.
you have not. Okay. I
No, I
will
have
look it
not.
up.
Yeah,
Um,
please send it to me.
yeah, I'll send it to you. The woman that I've heard it from, she's in Instagram, she does a lot of stories and she talks a lot about like the future of architecture. And she talks about, you know, movies mainly. She takes a lot of her ideas from movies because the architects that are designing these places like Dune or Star Wars, like where do they find their inspiration and where does their theory come from? Yeah, because it has a human aspect, but as well, it has
Yeah.
like big technology.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if it's kind of that almost maybe it's like an escape or like a subversion of technology. That's kind of how my brain would see it. It's like if what would happen if we gave ourselves fully to technology, would something like this occur? And I think those kind of thought practices, like Star Wars or Dune, I think we could see them as like theoretical exercises and kind of divulging into what AI could do. So I think those should be also, looked at as critical research because it's media, it's popular. Why are we latching onto it? Why do we think it's so impactful?
what you said is very important that you mentioned is like who is behind, who is programming all these AIs, like who is the person behind it, and what are their intentions, and like what how are they seeing the future of humanity? Is it based on money? Is it how they benefit from it, and now how their kids and their future generations are going to live? I was visiting land and I was seeing how people are starting to build. So starting a whole, let's say, neighborhood from scratch, right? And the thing is, what they start doing is they change the mountains. So they change the grading. They fill some areas, all to make it comfortable, right? And then they remove all the vegetation. So it converts
Hmm.
into something completely bare, right? But next to that project that I saw, I was like, I'm curious to see what's happening around it. And we go around, Drew. We drive less than a minute. The microclimate changes completely. So it's
Wow.
more humid. There's more less sun, less heat. It feels comfortable. There's more nature sounds, like
Crazy.
only by change in 1 minute of a distance. In the other place, I already got a sunburn. I was, you know, I'm like, it was completely different. And, I ended up talking to one of the owners of the land, all by coincidences. It wasn't even like planned. And I'm asking him all these questions of like, why are you doing this? Like, what is your purpose? And one of the purpose he says is for my kids, for the future of my kids. And I tell him, but so the future of your kids is a concrete
Hmm.
environment, or is it where they have access to food? Where they can get a mango or an avocado from their backyard or nearby. Doesn't even
Yeah.
have to be in their property, but nearby. And so you're changing this whole ecosystem. What is truly going to be left to your kids? And I told them, you have the responsibility, like you have a blessing that you can change that. And his answer was, no, the neighbor does it that way. And I'm like,
Oh,
so
so
it's like
frustrating.
repeating what they see. It's like monkey see, monkey do. And that's how we operate. That's literally how we operate. And so when we're having these conversations, that is my goal. Think just a little bit different. You don't have to make big changes. Did you have to destroy that tree? No,
Yeah.
leave it.
Yeah.
We can plant it again. Yeah, but how long does it take it for that tree to grow
To
to that
grow. Yeah.
size?
Yeah. And it's crazy you mentioned that because even now, like in the Midwest, completely different location, but the suburban sprawl is crazy and people are tearing down trees and leveling beautiful landscapes of like Missouri forests and Kansas plains just to make suburbs. Um, and they're taking out, like you said, trees, or they're taking out wildlife, and they plant new stuff even, and they're like, oh, it's we're planting new stuff, it'll help. But again, like you said, it'll take 50, 60 years for that to do like grow, and we don't build to last more than 50 years anymore. So by the time that tree is full grown, the property is going to be dilapidated and you're going to want to tear it down again. So then that tree needs to go again. It's like a cyclical cycle of destruction. And I think there's a lot more, um, I don't know the right word. Like it's less, and I think like, I think it's such a masculine idea to go in and just destroy, level, and place. I mean, I think about like Robert Moses. That's the name that pops up all the time in school. In New York City, just going and saying, I want a road here, 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 put some bridge here, make it happen. Very top down planning. And I don't want to speak for him, but when you're saying, like, I'm planning for my kids, they're looking at the end of the day at like the bank account. They're looking at, okay, I have money to financially support my kids. This is the financial decision. But I think I was watching a previous podcast. I'm going to plug yourself. You were doing one about finding new forms of wealth, right? And I think this is what you're talking about, right? Trying to find other ways outside of like a dollar bill or or like a giant home, or leveling everything just to have your ideal place. Finding new forms of enjoyment or wealth within the nature around you, or what was there, like that tree that was there before it was gone. That is wealth. And I think, yeah, you guys nailed it on the head.
And the thing that why I bring this up about, like you mentioned, leveling. So I lived a long time like in a really small beach town, which is where I am now, and this is why I was having issues. It's a very small town, but it's in Las Serenas, specifically Playa Bonita, and it's in Samana. That's like the region in the Dominican Republic. I was riding, it's called a concho, which is like a taxi in a motorcycle.
Okay.
And I'm going to a meeting, and I tell the driver, is it gonna rain where I'm going to? This is what he says. Look at the cloud. That cloud always moves exactly the same. So he's telling me how the cloud moves. And usually it never rains where I'm going unless there's like a different wind, or because of a storm, or something very specific. And listening to this wisdom of this, man driving me to my meeting, I was like, oh my God. So I ask him more questions, and I tell him, what's happening in Las Terrenas that I leave and I come back and the weather changes, like the temperature, like it's hotter. Last year wasn't this hot, or the ocean is reacting a certain way. And this man tells me, it's not the trees actually, it's the feeling of the land.
Wow.
It's changing the soil. That's the issue. The real issue.
That's crazy. And like, I think I was I don't know who wrote this, but it's called Citizen Architects, Other Ways of Doing Architecture. And they have like a really powerful line in there talking about how architects are like citizen experts, and then there's expert citizens. And so like in this case, like we go into these places, right, trying to design, trying to help these communities, trying to figure out what's going on, but we'll never know as much as the locals do. We never will. And I think that's a great example, and I think it's like reframing our mindsets of, instead of, coming in, knowing better, like we're going to level everything, we're going to change the way the clouds move and where rain falls. We need to be thinking about, we know differently. So we know about the technical aspects of, okay, well, this is how a normal home is laid out, and this is the function of it, and this is why a doorway is this wide. But we need to really listen, and we need to like trust them as much as they trust us, because at the end of the day, this is their land, or they know this space better than us. Our clients do most times for like these kind of projects. So it's really important to, listen. And I think that's so interesting though. The soil, that's crazy.
Soil. So all this time I'm thinking it's the trees, but it's actually the soil. So, it's a combination of both for sure. It's true because, what was happening, one of the places I lived, they did a whole remodel and they were flooding. I call a sustainable engineer that is a friend, and he's into engineers, and he said, the issue is that they leveled the whole land here. And so the water doesn't have where to go. So
Yeah.
what does it do? It floods, or it goes to the neighbors, So also that consideration of like not thinking of your neighbor, just thinking of your space, not to flood. And he was giving, techniques. First, you don't fill the land everywhere, and you mainly leave the natural soil around the house, because then there's drainage and the structure is not affected. And so like it's like so simple. And this is where I learned this at KU when I was doing lead. I did a lead GA certification. I never got the largest one because I never worked on a lead project. And the thing that I was learning while I was doing the certification was that, wow, in not developed countries, how do you call it? You know, before we used to call it third world countries, now it's developing countries.
Developing. Yeah.
Developing countries. It's again, they have techniques that they've used for generations that somehow the developed countries have forgotten. And so when I see the sustainability and I'm learning, this is common sense in Dominican Republic. This is, you know, cross ventilation is like the most important thing. And so, but what the thing is that what's happening with at least LEED, which is what I studied years ago, I know that has been updated, is like it's so expensive to even become a building become LEED certified. So it also becomes a business. And it's also about what technology can we use, but in a way that other people cannot use it. So only a few people can use it. So going back to technology, taking the power back and being like common sense is actually the sustainability.
Yeah,
Like
and I think and I think it's so deeply tied to especially modernism, like the idea of modernism being this kind of universal idea, especially coming out of like the Bauhaus, and thinking about how as soon as that broke up and that spread everywhere, that was like what people wanted to do, and disregarded the climate they were in, disregarded, the vernacular, or like the subaltern architect. They went in and they said, this is what we need to do. And it is a form of colonialism, and trying to go back into these spaces and create buildings or use technology and ideas like cross ventilation that are so expensive now to create. I think that's because our business of architecture is tied to our history of colonialism within these practices. So a way to subvert that, is to not think of architecture as a business. And yeah, it may cost more, but at the end of the day, it's like you're taking that cost for like a better life, so it's hard to be like, how do we, obviously, because some people can't afford to go LEED platinum, it's so expensive, and it's tied to this history of, a colonial business of modern architecture. So how do we fix that connection? And I think there are technologies that are starting to, break that, but we really need to catch AI and catch technology where it is now and kind of sideswerve it into this idea of it needs to be subversive and it needs to fight back against this history so that we can create sustainability equitably so that everyone has access to it. Because it's unfair if people with money are the only ones who can live sustainable, healthy lives. So, yeah, and I think that's another thing too, the dismissing of this common knowledge or like the knowledge of people who have lived in these places for ages, dismissing that as vernacular, as kind of a style of architecture rather than like its own inherent form, I think is really, really disruptive in a bad way. So we really need to uplift those and listen and say, this isn't just vernacular architecture, it's architecture. So I think even like it's nice to categorize that, yes, but we need to really uplift that and start thinking of that as critically and as powerfully as we do like modern architecture or, the next big sustainable project and who knows where. Both of them are super important.
Yeah, and I think mentioning cost, I think it has to be added to the benefits of building a building, because then where do the costs go? They go into higher electricity, heating and cooling. And so, weighing truly, like, what is it truly? Are we really saving, or are we not? Or only a few people are saving? But in reality, as a collective, we're not really saving anything. In Kansas City, if you ever get the chance, there is in the crossroads this architect or guy. He started designing only a few passive housings. There's a few left in the 70s. And I was able to visit one that was on sale. I was trying to do a bid, but they outbid, It was the owner of a restaurant. He got it before me. Like immediately he saw that, like we crossed each other. He saw
And
my
he's like, "Oh,
interest.
I need it."
And he outbid. We didn't even get the chance to bid, but it was a passive housing. And it was so beautiful. It's smaller, but 2 levels. And I just thought it was genius because it was what they did was the entrance became basically so the
Okay.
entrance was part of the hallway on the first and second level. And so it was made out of wood, the floor and the ceiling, with like a few openings. So it's very thin in between the slabs of wood. And what it does, it brings the hot air up and then it circles down. And then that hallway had windows from floor to ceiling. So it heats
Yeah, get that
the
spaced
house.
out.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so simple, Drew. And then the top floor had a slanted ceiling so it can go up and then down, right? So it can circulate. And obviously
Yeah.
there's more technical part that I'm not explaining, but when I saw that, I'm like, this is genius. This is why not all the houses in this neighborhood just like kept going, you know? And it wasn't just like one guy saying this is the future and design 4 or 5. But like even that, that technology is so simple and cost effective. And so say that.
Yeah, I think it feels so simple and it feels like common sense to, design sustainably, or it should feel that way. But it's so hard to get people on board who have a vision going into a project, or homeowners. They have a vision. They say, I want this exact idea, and they just want to replicate it everywhere. So it's hard, to break that mold. But that's our duty. That's our job. We go in there and we say, we need to rethink this. We need to listen. We need to really feel what the space is like, feel what we can use, what is the earth giving us in this case that we can build into the project.
Okay, so shifting a little bit, not too much, but I want to know what you think about like we talk about a lot about like Egypt and the pyramids, how were they built? Like
Mm-hmm.
why did they have that technology and we don't today? And so I want to know your thoughts on that. But
My thoughts, yeah. Okay.
yeah. Just your personal thoughts. And also, I want to add a parenthesis in that. Did you ever see the movie, like one of the X-Men, that at the end they show this guy like moving rocks and creating the pyramids?
No? I have not seen that movie.
Okay, I'll send you.
Send me a clip or like where it's from, and I'll definitely watch it. But yeah, I actually had this conversation not too long ago about the pyramids and like the great 7 wonders of the world, like historic ones. And it was kind of stemming from like a conversation about racism in architecture, because I think it's really interesting that obviously we have the pyramids, right, and we discredit the communities that have built them historically. And we constantly create these narratives of like, oh, the aliens built it, or oh, someone else built it for them. Like, there's no way they had the technology. And I'm honestly going to bring it back to colonialism and say that it's like a colonialization of the mind. It's really like the way we think about architecture and the way we think about these practices and the way we think about people in like Egypt as white people, or like us in the Midwest. We think of them as, so vastly different than us and honestly beneath us. That's what we're taught throughout all media. All Hollywood media is like, there's no way they could have built the pyramids. So it's had to be some other highly intelligent, almost alien-esque species that did it for them. And obviously that's racist, because it's like we're not listening, and they literally carved in the walls of the pyramids the process of them building it, and we're still refuting that they did that. I think it's honestly upsetting, but it's fascinating that there's so much evidence for them building it, and so much evidence. And I mean, this can be applied to anything, right? Anything like that. Even like homes in, South Africa, or like, I'm thinking about like the Aboriginal people in Australia. those huts that are raised off the ground. There's people are like, there's no way they could have thought of that. That's so genius, and people like Glenn Marquette are using that to, design homes, and people are saying it's so innovative. There's been people who've been doing this forever. And we're not giving them credit, right? And I think that's my thoughts on that, is that we don't give them enough credit.
Have you, apart from like the credit, have you like thought about this process to incorporate it in your designs, or how do you navigate that knowledge that you have?
Like this kind of relearning or like restructuring of what the vernacular might mean in my projects, or like that kind of second knowledge. I think as obviously I'm only a third year, so I haven't necessarily run into a project specifically tied to that, but I definitely think it has made me think about my process, especially in research. This next studio in the spring, we're doing mixed use development, and I'm targeting mine to be centered on like a youth center and senior living center together to form different various models of mutual aid between the communities. Because in America, we have an issue of kind of, ditching our elderly in homes, which is really sad. And then, we don't have enough care for our youth. So trying to find a system between those two where they can share resources and time with each other, so that they both benefit. But within this project, I think like if we're tying this back to, understanding like vernacular, I think in this case, it would be really asking the elderly and the youth, like, okay, what kind of spatial practices do you do? Like, what are the ways you use your space? What kind of things are you wanting to see? How do you use your space in this way? Like, what are the relationships you're expecting to build? I think is another example of subverting that narrative of like, we know best and we're coming in and we're going to, design for you instead of with you. And I think that's the same thing with the pyramids, right? There's no way we thought that they could form like a community strong enough with enough knowledge to build these things. So someone had to have designed it for them. So I think taking that and subverting that narrative is really powerful.
And also, one of the things that I was thinking is like slaves did them. It had to be slaves.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if it's actual passion and actual believing in something, and like you said, the community coming together and creating something grand?
Yeah, and that's always tricky, because it's like we obviously, with like the burning of Alexandria and all of these historic events, we've lost all of this knowledge from like the history of it, and I think that's why it's so easily debated. But yeah, it's always interesting to think about, like, do communities build like a sense of pride for something like that, even though it's a lot of work, or was it all slave labor? It's so hard to piece through. But it definitely, I think that's more debatable and easily like hard to wrap our minds around, rather than the fact that they did build it. So I think there's definitely two sides to that, and that's a good, like, that's tricky. It makes you think. I'll have to, like, I don't have enough research to discuss that, especially as like a white man. So I can't like sit here and be like, I think this, but like that's just, it's not my place to do that. Especially if I don't have the research to do it.
It must be hard to be a white man today in age.
I do not think it's hard to be a white man. There's so many privileges.
I know.
So many privileges.
I know, but having that responsibility of knowing that and owning it and actually trying to make a difference.
And I think I hope none of my classmates see this, because I'm about to roast them a little bit. But we were having a conversation in our theory class the other day. Mind you, our entire class is mostly white. We were having a conversation.
Who's your professor?
Chad Krause for theory.
Yeah, he was my same.
Yeah, for theory, and we had a conversation on race and architecture, and the amount of silence in this conversation was insane. Because you as a white person need to step up and own, the history and the benefits you have. And, you may not have the knowledge to speak on it, but silence does just as much harm as speaking out against, So I think, yeah, I do think we, especially as white people, have a responsibility to be allies, to people of color, to queer people, to disabled people. But I also think we need to know part of our allyship is when to shut up, when to just provide space, use our resources to allow them to speak. So
can you talk more about this silence that it's like worse? Because I'll give you a backstory and then you can continue. Again, same town that I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of flooding, and the only reason I know that this flooding was created by this compound that was, I'm calling it compound, but it's like a private residency, was because I was visiting one of the owners next to it, and the owner was like, before they built this, we didn't have these flooding issues. That's another project, by the way. So it's not like one project has this flooding issue because of renovation. And because before it was fine, and now it's like flooding, like inside, like a river inside their house. These people have more money, the others don't, right? The ones that are getting flooded don't have that much money. And so they're being affected. But they don't take responsibility. So this is their solution. 5 years later, or whatever years later, they dug in between their property because the government didn't allow them to dug in, the public space. So they dig inside their private property. And what they do is they took all the water that is flooding and moved it and just opened into the ocean. So right now, there's a huge tubo in Spanish, whatever, that just like floods into the ocean with all this gray water. Like gray water, like disgusting water.
It's so hard, especially when you have clients of privilege, right? Clients, with privilege and the money to sit on it and make the choices that affect other people. Then you have to find solutions, and it's so hard to find that middle ground, something that's economically stable versus something that's not. And I mean, this can go into a whole critique of capitalism too, but we don't have the time for that today.
No,
but
we don't. And what I was gonna say about the silence is that I did a video. I did a video, and it took like all that I have to do it. In the sense, it was easy to do it, but to publish it, I think, and for other people to, and it's been reposted a lot. Like, I don't even know, it has its life of its own. And like, one of the things I do is I'm going to erase later because I also don't want to create a fight, because when you fight, there's no solutions. And I say it on the video. What I'm looking for, and the people that commented on the video, what I'm looking for, it's a community for us to come together and find a different solution. I don't have the solution. There are solutions out there. I don't have it. I haven't researched it. But if we come together, we can do something about it. Because fighting or saying a beautiful post is not going to solve an issue. So talk to me about silence and how you see it, because it also will help me keep doing things like this.
Yeah, of course. So I have two thoughts for this. The first one is about the silence. So I think silence is given to those. I think there's two types of silence, right? I think there's silence that is given, or I guess told onto people by people with privilege, and then there's another type of silence that people dawn upon themselves with privilege. I don't think that oppressed communities are necessarily silent because they've been rendered silent. So I think for me as a white person, when I'm talking about race, I need to know when to speak up, but I also need to know when to be quiet. And because of like this dichotomy and like learning when to be silent, it's hard because I've never experienced racism. I've never experienced sexism. So how am I supposed to know how they feel? How am I supposed to know the right way to go about, fixing this solution with no experience? And that's where you need to be silent. And I think that the silence, like choosing to be silent, though, when you can speak up about things, especially when we're talking about theory and we're talking about how race manifests in architecture. Us as architects play a role in that, and we now need to speak up and be cognizant of that if we are choosing to be architects. We can speak on it as a term of a white architect, and we can say, I have done this and I need to reconcile with that as an architect. And I know the privileges that I have, and even vocalizing that. And I think vocalizing that gives it so much power. And I think that's why, like, whenever we have like art talks or discussions, or even anytime we have a lecture series acknowledging that we're on stolen land, or having these conversations about, the amount of slave labor involved in the university we're living on, these kind of things, just saying that may not feel like a lot, but even those acknowledges that verbalization, that speaking of those things reminds us of all of the history and then recontextualizes what we're about to talk about. So I think that's really important. And then as you were talking about with the, starting a fight and not wanting to do that, I think there is like a transformative power in rage, though. I do think that, like, bell hooks wrote an entire book about, it's called Killing Rage, Ending Racism. And it talks about, how this rage is it like ruptures, it creates ruptures in space, that we can start to fill with solution. And I think that's so powerful, right? And us as white people need to be quiet when, like, we're trying to give platforms to people of color and not trying to steal away their, spotlight and their talking. So yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share with us today in this platform, or anything you want to add?
Not really. I just wanted to thank you for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to just talk about this in like a really comfortable, open space, and yeah, I get to catch up with you after it's been a year. So
Yeah, thank you. And I want you to know this platform is here for you whenever you want to use it. You have a voice here, a place. And so also any type of like collaborations that you want to do, whenever you have time. I know you're busy now with school, but or anything you want to discuss as well, like a different voice or mind. I'm open, and I'll also have you present, because I would love to work with you soon. So
all right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye. Space Whispers. Thank you for spending time with me today. Your host, Rainy, on the Space Whispering podcast. I hope today's episode gave you something to reflect on, inspire you, or energize you to create something beautiful. Help us grow this soulful community and spread the love by subscribing to the podcast, leaving a review, or sharing this episode with your community. If you're feeling called to transform your inner or outer spaces into a true reflection of you, let's connect. Schedule a discovery session with me at rainy.co or Instagram rainy_. What soulful actions will you take today? Keep listening to the whispers of creation and let your soul's magic flow into the world. See you soon. Besitos.